Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we're joined by our senior fellow, Dr. Stephen McCabe. So Steve, Boris Johnson has vowed to defeat COVID and build a better country over the next decade. In his leader speech to the virtual Conservative conference, he said he wanted to build a new Jerusalem with opportunity for all, improved housing and healthcare, but he warned the UK could not return to normal after the pandemic, which would be a catalyst for major change. He also rejected suggestions that he has lost his mojo. So what did you make of his speech?
Well, it was typical Johnson. It rambled on in various ways. The one takeout, it was the announcement on wind, which in the big context of things, he was talking about £160 million investment in new turbines for offshore wind farms that's going to sort of create all our energy needs in 10 years and sort of take us away from fossil fuels. Yeah, I mean, but there's a whole host of other things that would have to happen with that, that the technology is not yet developed. He's talking about sort of more effective and efficient turbines. It will require about £50 million worth of investment. So, plus the fact that the other thing that he was talking about was he was going to solve the care home crisis, but no indication of how that's going to happen. Also, of course, the idea that sort of he's going to try and improve the prospects for sort of first-time buyers by 95% mortgages, but the mortgage lenders are not going to sort of go with that because, of course, they're being utterly scrupulous and indeed cautious at the moment because, of course, tough times are ahead. So what it was as expected, he's trying to sort of move the agenda on from COVID because, of course, that's dominated the last, 8-9 months, or certainly since the sort of the beginning of lockdown in March. So that's like 7 months. But of course, we've kind of lived with this thing ever since January, and all the consequences it's brought. So I think that it was partly about that. But of course, his big difficulty is that sort of we're all talking about the post-COVID world, but of course we're in it. And we can't even get track and trace right. The infection rates are sort of going up. We're probably going to be into sort of to more restrictions in terms of lockdown. So it's really difficult. I mean, I understand that the sort of the game here, trying to sort of concentrate on a sort of brighter future. But of course, for a lot of people, it'll be about the here and now, particularly those who lose their jobs. So some commentators sort of call it a barnstorming speech and Thatcherite. But I saw it as being what it was, which was just big on sort of ambition, although the ambition was peculiar and not particularly sort of well thought through, it seemed to me. But sort of light on sort of the content, so we shall sort of see. But I think the sort of the immediate future is the one that most people are going to be concentrating on.
So musicians protested across the UK yesterday. The events were designed to put pressure on the government to give more support to self-employed artists. The protest came as Chancellor Rishi Sunak suggested that they might have to find alternative employment. He highlighted the government's £1.57 billion rescue package for the arts, but that money is actually being distributed to museums, galleries and venues rather than individuals. So what more do you think needs to be done to support these people? And do you think it's fair to just ask them to get a new job?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because, of course, the sort of the phenomenal amount of money that's been given to workers, obviously those on the payroll, and to those people who are sort of self-employed. I mean, there are other sort of categories of people who, whether or not they've managed to sort of to get any furlough money, that of course is going to end regardless at the sort of the on the 31st of October. Where do they go from there? Because of course, it's not going to be happening anytime soon, it seems to me. Because I don't think you do live music early on the evening. It's certainly, I mean, these music venues tend to be after 10 o'clock, which is highly problematic, for the foreseeable future. But this idea of going and get another job, doing what? Was it Teresa Coffey sort of said people could train as care home workers? Well, that's easy to say, but extremely difficult to do. And it takes a certain sort of person to want to do that sort of work anyway, because it's not like going and working in a factory where you have to have sort of empathy for the sort of the people you're dealing with. But yeah, I think that there's a real danger. There's a whole generation of artists, musicians, and the sort of people that you mentioned who are going to be lost. But of course, their difficulty is that I suppose that the hope is that they can maybe sit it out for the next, whatever it might be, 5-6 months and hope that things get better. But I wouldn't like to put any big guarantees on that. So it's profoundly worrying because of course we have a very vibrant music scene. And if that is not there when all this is over, then it's a great loss.
So Unite, the Labour Party's single biggest donor, has decided to cut its affiliation money to the Labour Party by about 10%. Unite provide the party with millions in funding every year, but there is anger in the union about Labour's direction under Sir Keir Starmer, with the source saying he and his inner team were just not listening. So what impact do you think this could have on the party?
Well, I mean, the Labour Party is going through the sort of the normal throes of trying to work out what it wants to be in the future, and of course, having lost every election since 2000, which of course when the coalition got in, and of course the next election will not be to 2024. That means it'll be out of power for 14 years at the very minimum. Clearly, sort of Keir Starmer wants to be a decent opposition leader, but of course his difficulty is that a lot of what the government are doing, he's either abstaining or supporting. So the bedrock of the Labour Party, the left wing, see him as being too compliant, too acquiescent with what is going on, and of course what that does do to the more left-wing elements of the Labour Party, because of course, like all parties, a broad church, that they don't see him as giving the opposition that certainly the likes of Corbyn would have been doing, and maybe even the likes of Tony Blair. But of course, these are difficult times, and of course, and then he gets accused in Prime Minister's Question Time, which will be happening later on, of not being sufficiently supportive. So he's getting it from all angles, it seems to me. It's a really difficult job because, of course, what he is entirely cognizant of is the next election, and he's trying to build up that support, particularly among the people that were lost last time, the so-called red wall voters who went from Labour, possibly went to UKIP, certainly voted to leave Europe, and then voted for the Conservatives last December to get Brexit done. So, but whilst at the same time trying to keep the metropolitan voters who did vote for Labour and stuck with them happy also. It's really difficult, and of course I think the message of what the Labour Party is, it's kind of becoming a bit fuzzy.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.